I will I will introduce our moderator for this session, which is Sundar Babu. Sundar Babu uh, is from Tamil Nadu, and he is a working committee member of WPC, and he is also part of Labor Access, our research wing. He has been working on labor policy, labor related issues for a decade now. After he did his PhD in JNU, and he has worked on various issues to do with labor as well as on agriculture and land. He has been a point person for our ESI campaign, doing the most of the writing and analysis for that. And he's not only he's an activist academic. So over to you, Sundar.
Thank you, Minaji. Welcome and good afternoon, everybody. My throat is not well. I've been having some issues, so I'll try to speak the minimum. Firstly, straight away, I would like to invite our speaker today because the recent budget was a big disappointment. A lot of expectations were there because various campaigns were going across the country and a lot of trade union initiatives were active, and with that kind of an scenario, we thought that some solid breakthrough might happen because we from WPC we had submitted certain petitions seeking social protection for informal sector workers, etc. And the ministries had given some kind of an indirect assurance that something is brewing and we are going to do announce something in the coming months. But all that was like completely shattered when this new budget was announced. But somehow it seems to be the language seems to be very confusing and not so clear. So it is in this context we thought we will have a discussion and we will take the views and interpretations from some of our experts who have been working with WPC for quite some time. It is in that context we requested Professor Ravi Srivastava to share his inputs on the budget, especially in the context of what is there for the labor, the ordinary informal sector people of this country. So I would like to briefly introduce Professor Ravi Srivastava. He is currently the director for the Center for Employment Studies, Institute for Human Development, Delhi. He's also the chairman, board of governors of ICSSR supported Institute of Development Studies, Jaipur. He's a former professor of economics and chairperson for Center for Study of Regional Development, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, and a former full-time member in the rank of Secretary, Government of India of the National Commission of Enterprises in Unorganized Sector, chaired by late Dr. Arjun Sen Gupta. Professor Ravi Srivastava has received his education from the University of Allahabad, the Delhi School of Economics, Jawaharlal Nehru University, and University of Cambridge. His main areas of research and publication include labor and employment, migration, social protection, agriculture, rural development, rural poverty, informal sector, regional development, decentralization, human development, and land reforms. He has published 5 books, 4 monographs, more than 100 papers in national and international journals, and has produced 35 research reports and has carried out more than 25 major research projects sponsored by agencies such as UNICEF, ILO, the World Bank, ESRC, UGC, ICSSR, and Shastri Indo-Canadian Foundation, and others. So he's a recipient of numerous awards and scholarships, including the Commonwealth and Fulbright Fellowship, the UGC Award in Economics in 2001
Hi,
for
Sundar. I
innovative
think
research.
we can skip the rest. Okay, just we can carry on with the discussion.
Okay, so I mean this list of credits to Professor Srivastava goes to, I think, several pages. So I mean, as requested, I think we can um, uh, request him, because to mention the key thing is that he has been the past president of Indian Society for Labor Economics and UP and Uttarakhand Economics Association. That's something which is important for us. So in this context, there are like several other credits to him with regards to several governments and international agencies. So in this context, we straight away request Professor Ravi Srivastava to help us in understanding and interpreting the budget, the recent budget, and so that no, it will help the WPC, the Working People's Coalition, to plan its activities and actions in the coming months. Professor Ravi Srivastava.
Thanks, Sundar, and thanks, Meena, for inviting me to make this presentation. I'll actually, I will not be using a PowerPoint. So I'll be speaking out the salient points. I'll try to take as little time as possible so that there's more time for question, answer, and discussion. Uh, so let me begin. First of all, I know I'm talking to a set of very well-informed people, but I think still, as an introductory note, I think it's worthwhile to point out that the budget is really, uh, budget is the fiscal policy instrument of the fiscal instrument of policy. It's a component of overall economic policy in any country. Uh, it is basically, if there's an English saying, putting your money where your mouth is. So a budget is really reflects how policy concerns of the government are being translated into its spending priorities, and it's also where it actually, in order to spend, where it raises its revenue from. Uh, Now over a long period of time, the budget and the ministries of finance, this is basically because of the way the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank looked at the world. This thing, the budget and the Ministry of Finance has become also the repository of economic policy. So the budget, although budget is an instrument of policy, but it is also a place now where a number of policies are announced for the first time. Uh, Policies and programs and schemes are announced, and where then money is a lot allocated against them for expenditure. Uh, so one looks at the budget from both point of views. One looks at the budget from the point of view of how it is raising resources to run the country, and how where it is spending the money. But we also look at the budget when we wait for the budget, because inevitably the budget makes a large number of policy pronouncements. So, how do you judge the budget? The budget, as I said, is the fiscal instrument of economic policy. I think in order to the best way of judging the budget as an important instrument of economic policy is to look at how the economy itself is behaving. Uh, and then, of course, to look at the specifics of the budget itself. So, how has the economy been performing in India over the last few years? Over the last years, I think a very brief reflection, a very brief retrospective account of the economy is necessary to put the budget in perspective. Uh, the economy, if you look at the Indian economy in growth terms, purely in growth terms, did pretty well between 2002-3 to 2000, roughly about 2011-12. And then it did not show an equal kind of momentum after 2012-13. Uh, the NDA alliance came into government in 2014. In 2017, the national account base year was revised by the Central Statistical Organization under it. And as a result of the revision of the base year, what happened was that the growth rate before 2011-12 uh, became lower, and the growth rate after 2011-12 uh, became higher, became more elevated. uh, the performance of the government post 2014-15 for the first few years looked reasonably rosy, reasonably well. But from 2017-18 onwards, in particular, in fact, from 16-17, but particularly from 17-18 onwards, the Indian economy growth rate, and I'm here speaking purely in terms of growth rate uh, and nothing else, the Indian economy's growth rate started decelerating. Uh, it continued to decelerate till the COVID year. In the COVID year, it of course registered a negative rate of growth. Thereafter, for 2 years, there was a bounce back from COVID, and now again it shows a slowdown. It shows a slowing down. So actually, if we look at the, for example, if we look at the growth rate between 11-12 to 17-18, the Indian economy grew at an average rate of 6.8%. But in the period from 17-18 to 23-24, which includes the COVID year and the subsequent bounce back period and so on, the Indian economy has grown at the rate at an annualized growth rate of 4.65%. So it has not been able to achieve even a growth rate of 5% in the last 7 years. Annualized growth rate has been below 7%. However, the signal failure of the Indian economy is much more stark when we look at a few other indicators, and particularly when we look at the employment indicator. If we look at the employment indicator, uh, 2017-18 employment is a messy thing to measure. There are various yardsticks by which one can measure employment. Uh, One is the yardsticks that we use. We use more than one yardstick to measure what we can call open unemployment. Open unemployment is when a person is unemployed throughout a long period of time. Uh, Now, open employment in a country like India is generally small. It is generally associated with educated people. The bulk of educated people are from better off households. Open unemployment in India actually declined between 2017-18 and 23-24. And the government naturally has been trying to project this, has been projecting this, has also been projecting the fact that it has generated a lot of jobs, and I will come to that. Uh, However, when we also take into account underemployment in the Indian economy, underemployment, typically we would expect a person, a laborer or a self-employed person, to be working about 48 hours a week, 6 days, 8 hours a day, typically working 48 hours a week. So, but if the person ends up working for 30 hours or 28 hours or 16 hours, then that person can be described as being underemployed. Uh, if we convert the period of underemployment into unemployment days, unemployment persons, what we find is that the extent of unemployment in India is huge, and it has been rising. So if you compare the data, and we have sort of calculated both the underemployment and unemployment, and what we find is that unemployment, when you take account of underemployment, actually grew for something like 19% in 2017-18 to something like 23% in 23-24. So basically, of every person who wanted to work, who was in the labor force, roughly almost one out of four persons can be described to have been unemployed in the year 23-24. Now, if the unemployment data, the news was not bad enough, um, the news about wages is even worse. So basically, what we find is that the wages of salaried workers and the wages of self-employed people has actually declined between 17-18 and 23-24, and this is something which our calculations show it. We've calculated this in detail. They show this. But now, of course, even the government of India in the economic survey has conceded that there has been a decline in real wages of salaried workers and self-employed workers in the last 7 years in this country. So not only has the problem of underemployment increased, but also the problem of declining wages. The working people are earning less today than what they did 7 years ago, both the salaried people as well as self-employed people. In the case of casual workers, we find that there has been a nominal increase, very marginal increase of 1.5%. So if you even though the economy has grown slower, the economy has grown at about 4.65% a year. Uh, Real wages have declined. Real incomes of a majority of people, self-employed and salaried people together, constitute about 75% of all workers in the Indian economy. So, three quarters of the workers in the Indian economy registered a negative rate of growth over this period. Uh, you need to combine this with some other statistics which go. One of them is that the personal debt, household debt, has increased very sharply in recent years. It increased very sharply in the COVID year, uh, and subsequently it has increased to a level that it now is roughly about 43% of gross domestic product. To 43, the level of personal debt in India today is roughly 43% of GDP. And in 23rd, in the year 2023, in the last quarter, personal debt had jumped 18.3% over the previous year. So the Reserve Bank of India has been pointing to this rather concerning phenomena of personal debt rising, and this is the main component of personal debt which has increased is non-housing debt. So basically, it's consumption-related debt. Whether it's assets or other kinds. So consumption-related debt has been rising at a phenomenal rate in India, and this combines with very low savings rate. So, in general, the working people are in distress, and the working people have been in distress despite a number of, despite narratives which are built up, which try to project that in fact India has been doing very, very well over this long period of time. This is not reflected in the data. The economy is growing slowly. Effective unemployment rates, when you take account of underemployment, have grown. They're phenomenal today. As I said, nearly a quarter of people are underemployed. So this is the context in which the Indian budget is being formulated. Um, one more fact, I think, which we again is something which the economic survey itself highlights, is that the profit rates, the profit to income ratios today in the corporate sector are the highest in the last 15 years. In fact, another data highlights the fact that even though the sales of corporate, in fact, corporate sales increased by just about 4.6% over the last 10 years or so, corporate profits annually increased at the rate of 18.5%. So you have a situation which the economic survey itself highlights, where corporate profits have been rising and have risen to unprecedented levels, but wages are declining. Uh, Incomes are rising, but wages of the majority of workers are declining. So the basically the profit wage ratios are increasing. The ratio of profits to wages are steadily increasing in the Indian economy. Uh, so you have this is a situation of generalized distress, even where corporate profits are rising, and incomes also, although they are not rising fast enough, are still rising at the rate of about 5%, 4 to 4.6% a year over the past 7 years. Now, this situation can be alleviated, and I think as working people, as people associated with the WPC, as workers, as people associated with the workers' movement, what we must realize that the workers' movement has to look at the broader issues of development, the broader issues of maldevelopment, so to say. And the broader issues of maldevelopment are related to the fact that the Indian economy has not been able to increase the rate of employment, has not been able to, therefore, increase the bargaining power of labor. It has not been able to increase the productivity of small self employed micro enterprises. And the main reason for this is that the whole thrust of development has been on very large enterprises, on large business houses, on large enterprises, whereas micro enterprises, which form the majority of enterprises in India, small enterprises, the informal sector, has largely suffered, has largely, and this is a sector which actually has a potential for creating employment also. This is a sector which is creating. So, what you need is a policy framework in which there can be a steady growth of productivity and employment in the micro small sector. Uh, and the medium sector also, you can say, but the medium sector has now been redefined to, and particularly and after this budget, it has been redefined to 500 crores worth of of sales turnover, which is actually a very large size in some sense. So this is the context in which we need to look at the budget. Now, um, if you remember, in the COVID period, many of us, and we had debates even on the forums of WPC, we had argued that in COVID, demand needed to be increased. Demand needed to be increased because purchasing power of people had collapsed. But the government came up with a budget which was a supply side budget. It announced Make in India, it announced PLI schemes, announced credit, an expansion of credit, basically a lot of credit related schemes. So the government behaved as though the problem was a supply related problem and not a demand related problem. Somehow in this budget there has been a there seems to be a realization. In the last budget there was a realization that employment is an issue, and by the way, there is no discussion of Make in India, of sorry, of the ELI schemes which the government had floated in the last budget. I mean, the finance minister, as is usual with this government, when certain things are a failure, uh, they just move out of the narrative. So there was no discussion in the speech of the Prime Minister. There's no discussion in the budget of the ELI schemes. There is no discussion of the internship skills, the skill-based schemes which the Government of India introduced with great fanfare in the last budget. And the reason for that is that in the entire year, it has only been able to place just about 20,000 people in internship positions, which is not even a tiny fraction of what it targeted to be. So basically, the thrust has gone from employment and this thing as it was in the last budget. But in this budget, the government of India conceded that there was a demand side problem because consumption demand, it recognized, was not growing fast enough. So the one thing what it did was to give tax rebates. It has given a tax rebate in two ways. First, it has redefined for those who file their taxes. As you know, most of you know, there is a new tax regime and an old tax regime. In the old tax regime, there were some concessions given to people who had taken housing loans for their rentals, if they had taken medical loans, or they had invested in what are known as Section 88 schemes such as Public Provident Fund and so on. So they were given some exemptions from income tax. In the new tax regime, these tax exemptions were taken away. So what the government has done is that it has given some exemptions under the new tax regime in two ways. One, that all those who are earning less than 12 lakh rupees will be given a tax rebate. So they will pay zero tax on their income. Um, but that income, of course, excludes capital gains and certain other sources of income which will be qualified, on which they will continue to pay a tax. The second thing is that the tax slabs have been changed up to 24 lakhs. They have been changed up to 24 lakhs. So if you are under the new tax regime, you pay no tax up to 12 lakhs. Between 12 lakhs and 24 lakhs, you pay a lower tax. And the government is saying, the government's claim is that it will put about 1 lakh crores in people's pockets, um, the middle class pockets, pockets of the middle class, and this will enable middle class to earn more and to spend more. And this earning and spending more will help in reviving the economy through a consumption multiplier. So if they put in 100 100 thousand crores, uh, the actual impact on the economy and on demand could be something like, multiple times that, maybe 300,000 crores, and so on. That is the government's logic, and that is what economists who are part of the government have been arguing. So I just want to spend a little bit of time, because this is the main plank of the government. The main plank of the government this time has been that to stimulate demand and to foster the expansion of the economy through these tax rebates. Now, one may first of all question the morality, the ethics of these tax rebates, because 12 lakhs, no people earning up to 12 lakhs will not be paying in income, and 12 lakhs is roughly about 6.7, 6.8 times the per capita income of India. So people who are earning 6 to 7 times per capita, India's per capita income, will be exempt from paying tax. And it has been pointed out that globally, actually, in most parts of the world, people who earn a little over the average income levels begin to pay taxes. This exemption, this complete exemption, is something which has been called into question. Secondly, the the data which has been put out by government itself has been questioned, because government says that about 1 lakh crores will be put into people's pockets through rebates. But the figures are that, actually, if you look at the people who are taxpayers, although roughly 7.8 crore people file taxes, uh, a large number of them, almost 4.5 crores, paid zero taxes. So, in any case, they were not paying taxes earlier. They were filing taxes, but they were tax exempt earlier. Out of the remaining roughly 3 crore, 3.2 crore people, actually a majority pay taxes under the old tax regime. And if you are paying taxes under the old tax regime, either you do not benefit from these exemptions at all if you switch to the new tax regime, or you benefit very little. So effectively, it has been argued that the benefits will be derived only, not by all of these 3.2 crore people, or the majority of them who earn less than 24 lakhs, but the benefits will be derived by just about 50 lakh, 60 lakh people. So a much smaller number of people will derive the benefit. The amount of benefits will be much smaller, not 100,000 crores, but a former finance secretary has argued that this will be only about 25 lakh crore. Thirdly, people have argued that the so-called multiplier effect of this is going to be much smaller than what the government has argued or hopes for. So in effect, the demand side impact of these rebates on the economy is going to be much smaller than what has been anticipated. If the demand side impact has been much smaller, so the growth impact also will be much smaller. There will be hardly any. This will be, many economists have called this a growth neutral incentive. So it will not have any major incentive, it will have no impact on growth. So this is as far the major thrust of the budget. Now, if you take aside this major thrust of the budget, uh, there is very little to say about the budget. Uh, the budget assumes that incomes, the gross domestic product, will grow by about 11.6% between 24-25 and 25-26. Okay, so any increase less than 11.6%, if any sector the spending increases by less than 11.6%, then uh, the budgetary expenditure on that sector as a percentage of GDP will be going down, right? So you have to the if the expenditure on that sector increases by more than 11.6%, then the budgetary expenditure will go up as a percentage of GDP. Similarly, if you now revenue, as you can imagine, this government has done two things. One, of course, it has put some money in people's pockets, but the other thing which it has done is that it has uh, curtailed revenue expenditure. It has curtailed budgetary expenditure and revenue expenditure in an effort to bring down fiscal deficit. I'm not going into, for the time being, I'm not going into the the economic rationale of bringing down the fiscal where the fiscal deficit should be. But one thing is very clear, that if you bring down the fiscal deficit very sharply, then the scope for expanding the budget is very little. And what we find in this budget is that actually capital expenditure has been kept at this level of last year. So there is actually no nominal increase also in the level of capital expenditure, and revenue expenditure is it has expanded by only about 6.7%. So GDP increase is visualized at 11.6%, but revenue expenditure will increase by 6.7%. So revenue expenditure as a percentage of GDP is going down, and also any increase, any sectoral increase which is less than 6.7% means that the share in revenue expenditure of that expenditure is also going down. So I'm just laying this down so that you remember these figures, 6.7% and 11.6%, and then in the light of that we review, we look at the sectoral increases. And the point that I want to make is that most of the sectoral increases which have to do with the small production, with small scale, smallholder production, etc., and have to do directly with the smallholders, etc., their allocations have gone down in as a percentage of GDP, often as a percentage of revenue expenditure in some cases. So, and even and also in real terms, because inflation increase is assumed to be about 5.2% between these two budgets. So any increase which is less than 5.2% means that the real allocations have also not been constant. So if you look at this, you look at, for example, you look at this sector by sector to get an idea. Look at the Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Labor budget. The Ministry of Labor budget has not gone up at all. So the Ministry of Labor budget actually uh, has gone down in real terms. It has gone down as a percentage of revenue expenditure. It has gone down as a percentage of GDP. You look at the Ministry of Agriculture budget. The Ministry of Agriculture budget has actually gone down in nominal terms in relation to what was actually spent last year, and it has gone up in terms of the budgetary allocations last year. It has gone up by 3.9% only. So once again, it is declining in real terms, it is declining as a percentage of revenue expenditures, it is declining as a percentage of GDP. Education expenditure, uh, in school education, education expenditure has gone up by 7.6%. So the share is lower now, will be lower as a percentage of GDP, although slightly higher in terms of percentage of revenue expenditure. But in higher education, the increase was only 5.2%. So it just keeps pace with the inflation rate, but going down as a percentage of GDP. Most of this increase in higher education is concentrated in the new IITs. So that's where the increase is happening. Then, if you look at Ministry of Rural Development, which is a very crucial ministry in terms of because it the lot of the spending by the Ministry of Rural Development is on things like the National Social Assistance Program, or Manrega, the PM Gram Sadak Yojana, NLM, PMAY, and so on and so forth. If you look at it in relation to the allocation last year, the Department of Rural Development budget has only gone up by 1.5%. So it has gone down in real terms, and it has gone down as a percent of GDP, percentage of this thing. So it has gone down all the way. Similarly, also the ministry, the Women and Child Development budget, which is a very crucial budget, because again, schemes like ICDS, Nari Shakti, etc., uh, are placed in the Ministry of Women and Child Development. And finally, look at the MSME budget, the Ministry of the Micro, Small, and Medium Enterprises Ministry. Here, in relation to the allocations last year, the budgets have only gone up by 4.6%. So once again, it has gone down in real terms as a percentage of revenue expenditure, as a percentage of GDP. So the point that I'm making is that if you look at all of this, you can see that in all the crucial ministries, which are people oriented ministries, where smallholders are important: Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Rural Development, the MSME ministry, or whichever, or people's oriented, like the Ministry of Health. The Ministry of Health budget has gone up in real terms between the two budgets. And I'll maybe discuss it a little more, because it's gone up mainly in the two components of the Ayushman scheme, the Ayushman Health scheme, and the PM Swasth Suraksha Nidhi, and this probably deserves a separate discussion. So mainly the the central sector schemes, only housing is one area where, for example, you see an increase, increase in urban housing, although the government was not able to spend what it wanted to spend last year. Overall, you see that the schemes have not kept up even with the rate of inflation, certainly have not kept up with the rate of GDP. So this, of course, is a very disappointing aspect of the budget, that there is no refocusing of budgetary allocations on ministries which are people oriented, which where smallholders, small producers, which can address issues of small producers, uh, of small agricultural holders, and so on and so forth. So the budget's emphasis is somewhere else. PLI schemes have taken up a large number of large allocations, and so on and so forth. We can go into that in greater detail. Then one comes to specific, most of the, the there are two ways of looking at the budget. One is looking at the macro aspects of the budget. What exactly, how will it provide an impetus to employment growth? Will it provide an impetus to development? Will it provide an impetus to overall economic growth, which is pro-poor? That is one way of looking at the budget. The other way is that, okay, growth cannot address all the issues in the short term, in the medium term. Therefore, we need to look at the schemes which are pro-poor schemes, and we need to see what the budget is doing in terms of these schemes. And there are a large number of these schemes in India, which the central government takes care of. But again, if we look at it, and we can go through this scheme by scheme. Uh, the schemes under the Ministry of Labor, such as the PM Shram Yogi Mandhan scheme, here the total increase is 5%, which is lower than the rate of inflation, and hence lower than the revenue allocation, and so on. It has not gone up. This is one of the major flagship schemes of the government of India, the NDA government launched in 2019. Uh, no increase in budget has been made. The pension scheme, the PM Kisan Mandhan scheme, uh, has seen hardly any increase in budget. In any case, the budgetary allocation was only 100 crores. It has been increased to 120 crores. These are the two major schemes which were under the Ministry of Agriculture. Then we have the PM Garib Kalyan Yojana, uh, which is under the Ministry of Food, and the food distribution at the PDS comes under this scheme. And here again there is hardly no increase in allocation. The This year the allocation is 203,000 crores, as opposed to the allocation of 205,000 crores in the last budget. So there is no increase. Then, if you look at Atal Pension Yojana, there is a negative growth. The actual the allocation was 521 crores last time. It is only 308 crores this time. The PM Vay Vandan Yojana, it was 1078 crores last time. It is 890 crores this time. So again, you find a decline. Then NSAP, the National Social Assistance Program, very important because all the old age pensions, the pensions and the widow pensions and so on are covered by it. There is no increase in nominal. It is still slated as 200. That absurd and very, what shall I say, laughable uh, amount of 200 rupees per person. So there's no increase in the NSCP budget. It is maintained at 9,652 crores. Manrega, uh, again, no increase in the Manrega budget. It is maintained at the same level of 86,000 crores. No increase in the Manrega budget. There is an increase in the PM Gram Sadak Yojana, and there is no increase in relation to the allocations in the PM Awas Yojana. In relation to the actual expenditure, there is an increase. Poshan scheme, under which the ICDS comes, again there is a decline. There is a decline even in nominal terms. And the Nari Shakti scheme, once again, no increase in nominal terms. So there's a, which means in real terms there is a decline and so on and so forth. So basically, which are the schemes where there is an increase? The urban PM Awas Yojana scheme, there is an increase. Uh, the Ayushman Bharat sees an increase from 7,605 crores, which was the actual expenditure last year, to 9,400 crores. It is still a very, very small sum. It's still a very small sum because it aims to cover almost 60 to 70% of households now, members of households now. And the PM Swast and the PM Ayushman Health Infrastructure Scheme, where the allocations have been raised from 3,200 crores to 4,200 crores. So there is no increase in any of the social security schemes except for PM Ayushman Yojana, and one can look at the and one can see, have a further discussion on the PM Ayushman Yojana. All others, there is a negative rate of growth even you take account of inflation. Only housing and Ayushman Yojana. These are the only two schemes which have seen any kind of increase. So any hopes of seeing an increase in expenditure on social security in this budget, uh, any expenditure on seeing and schemes expenditure in relation to the code on social security, or in relation to the demands which have been made, as Sundar said in the beginning, have not been bellied at all, completely at all. So where do we stand? Actually, where do we stand in relation to all this? First, I think there are two important issues. One, I think, as people who are looking at the working class movement and so on, we need to keep in mind the broad development strategy, and how the broad development strategy is actually fostering inequality. And it is not only fostering inequality, is actually fostering uh, uh, declining incomes at the bottom of the pyramid. For the last 7 years, the fact that 75% of the population has had declining incomes, of the working population has had declining incomes, and that casual workers also have seen very small increases, 1% or so increase, is something which is really of tremendous concern. And this means that movements have to be concerned with development strategies more generally. Secondly, on social security, there are, I think, two big issues here which I think we need to take account of. One is that in relation to the demands which have been made, for example, ESI for all workers, pensions, old age pensions, and so on, there is no hope as far as this budget is concerned, because not even one paise has been spent more in any of this direction. There is even, I mean, the Ministry of Labor's budget itself shows that no other, nothing, there is no allocation for any scheme at all in this budget. So there's no hope of that. But the more important thing is where exactly is the social security architecture going? And where does the working people's movement stand in relation to that? What do I mean by that? If you look at the social security architecture as it is being rolled out by government, it is basically looking at contributory pension schemes, and it has already has four major contributory pension schemes for farmers, for traders, for unorganized workers, and for the general public, the PM Atal Yojana. These are all contributory now. The minimal contribution which governments were making uh, for to incentivize these schemes, or that has been reduced across the board in these budgets, no increase. Uh, there is no question of addressing life cycle issues through social protection. So declining budget, declining real budgets for Poshan, declining real budgets for Nari Shakti, declining real budgets for old age pensions across the board. So one, what is the government hoping to do? One, contributory pension schemes, nothing more, nothing less. Secondly, uh, public health insurance of Ayushman Bharat, uh, augmented by some investment in health infrastructure, where minimal investment from which is because the amounts are really very small, just 1,000 crore increase over a year, but nothing more, nothing less. And as you know, in discussions also uh, with gig workers and so on, the government is basically uh, foisting the same social security structure onto them. So recently, as you must have read and you must be aware of in the discussions that have done, they have said they have basically trying to expand the PM Ayushman Yojana to gig workers once if the registration issue can be resolved and so on. So one idea is to involve to expand the PM Ayushman Yojana. So at the central level, you have an architecture where the PM Ayushman Yojana and the contributory pension schemes are coming. And at the state level, you have another architecture where basically quasi income transfer schemes are being rolled out to women. Quasi because they are conditional to certain conditions, whether it's Maharashtra, whether it is MP, and so on. But they are ruled out. They were rolled already in the process of being rolled out, or have been rolled out in 14 states. In Delhi also, both the BJP and the AAP had promised this. So after the elections, there could be one more state where these schemes have been rolled out. So there are now these two contending perspectives on social security. One is the perspective with the working class movement is moving forward with, which is expansion of worker-based social security schemes, and looking at social security from the perspective of the working people. Uh, uh, and of course, extending social security to the families, but through the lens of work, through the lens of working people. The other is what the government is trying to bring in, which is insurance based health schemes such as Ayushman Bharat. Uh, and there is a certain logic to these schemes the world over, which is that invariably, as and when you depend on insurance based schemes, you invest less in public health infrastructure, and you become more and more dependent on the private sector and health insurance schemes. Uh, and that is the logic in this budget also, because the expenditure on health, the expenditure on education is limited. So the idea is that you become more and more dependent on the private sector and the private sector players. Education, everybody is ending up paying more. In health also, you end up paying more over a period of time for health insurance. At the moment, it is government funded. The PM Ayushman Yojana. Uh, so basically, the working people now, I think one of the issues is what we have to address is these two uh, competing directions in which social security is going. How exactly do we take a position uh, opposing, or take a position where we argue a case for For example, WPC is making out the kind of demands the WPC is making vis-a-vis the kind of architecture which the government is rolling out, a quasi-income transfer in state-wise for which states are responsible, the center is not responsible, a contributory pension scheme, and a health insurance scheme which is not none of these backed by an act, so they're not legislative provisions, they're not in the form of legislative guarantees, they are all schemes. So but this is the way the central government wants to go, and this is what the budget itself very clearly points out to. So I'll stop here. Basically, as these three strands is something which I believe we should discuss clearly. What is the broad strategy? In relation to the broad strategy, how the budget treats the production sectors and the people-oriented sectors, and within that, how specifically it has treated the whole issue of social security and social protection. So I'll stop here.
Thank you so much, Professor Ravi Srivastava. Uh, yeah, whatever you shared now, um, definitely was a concern that WPC was contemplating to take it up in a big way for quite some time. But we somehow we had this hope that this budget might be a kind of a tilt in other direction. But with whatever details you have given us, it shows that the decline seem to continue. So it is in. So we our yatra again when we started, we also had this concern that halfway through yatra, do we need to re-strategize, or how do we approach our campaign material? But then things, as you mentioned very clearly, that things seem to be either declining or going much worse direction. So it puts us back in a more relevant situation where we need to take up, as you rightly mentioned, about the concerns at the bottom of the pyramid. That has been the central concern of WPC as well. So thank you so much. I mean, thank you so much for these insights. Um, I would request. I didn't see any questions coming up on the chat box, but now maybe we can open the floor for clarifications and questions from the other participants. Is there any question or clarification?
There is something in the chat box, if you see that.
Yeah, there is this comment from Sumit. So his question is considering the persistent structural issues in Indian labor market, such as informality, unemployment, wage stagnation, and skill gaps. So, to what extent do its provisions for employment generation, social security expansion, and skill initiatives create a sustainable framework for improving labor market resilience, particularly in the context of global economic uncertainties, automation, and evolving nature of work in India? So, that's the kind of concern and question from Mr. Sumit.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if there are, because this is a very wide question, which I'm happy to answer. But basically, I mean, again, I'll come back to my initial thing that what we need to look at is what is an employment oriented growth strategy for India at the present moment. One of the challenges we are certainly facing is increased automation. Now, there will be a growing challenge from artificial intelligence, both at the which will also be a challenge for high skilled individuals, that as much as it will be for low skilled individuals in manufacturing and so on. So exactly, so in the light of all this, basically, what is the employment oriented growth strategy that we need to follow. One thing is very clear that in our country differs from many other countries uh, in the fact that it is a very large informal sector. 82% of the workers are in the informal sector. Most of the producing enterprises, very large percentage, are micro or small. Over 95% of the enterprises in this country are micro or small. Uh, so any strategy that we have has to address the bottom of the pyramid. It has to address issues of productivity. It has to issues of growth at the bottom of the pyramid, and it has to we have to build on that. We have to build productivity and competitiveness on the basis of that. It cannot be built on only large enterprises. We have seen that large enterprises tend to concentrate profits, are not giving workers their due share in any case, and they're not employment intensive at all. So the large enterprises may continue to play a role, but as far as policy thrusts are concerned, strategic thrusts are concerned, they have to be based on the large, very large informal sector and micro, small, and medium enterprises. That is the point I was making, that the budget has very hardly any provisions for them, hardly any provisions for them. And what Shumit is saying is correct. We need to have in mind a growth strategy, an employment-oriented growth strategy. Uh, what happens, social security is very important, social protection is very important, and we need to fight for it, but we need to fight for it within a broad strategy, where we continue to fight for for a pro people's budget, a pro employment budget, because otherwise what will happen? uh, I mean, I, the government will give, even if the government gives with one hand, it will take away with another hand. I just want to give you an example. The government has, if assuming that what it says is correct, and it has put 100,000, 100 thousand things in people's crores in people's pocket by way of tax rebates. Do you know how much money, even if incomes were stagnant between 1718 and 2324, completely stagnant, uh, do you know how much money would have come into people's pockets? 94,000 crores. So 94,000 crores would have come into people's pockets, the amount which the government is saying it would transfer without any single act of government. Supposing incomes had risen only by 2%, remember profits have been rising by 18%. The GDP has been rising by 4.65%. Supposing incomes rose only by 2% a year, had risen by 2% a year, incomes of self employed people and salaried people, you know how much more money would have come into their pockets? 425,000 crores would have come into their pockets. So, if we do not have an employment intensive strategy, people strategy, then the government will, even if it gives you social protection, even if it gives you some good incentives here and there, it will take out from one pocket, or the economy will take out from one pocket and only put back in the other pocket something by way of social security or something by way of social protection. That is not what we want.
Thank you, Professor. There is also another comment, another concern, linking the labor codes with the budget. I mean, especially when it comes to social protection or occupational health and safety, then there seem to be a big challenge in terms of consistency. So that's the comment that has come from one of our participants.
Yeah,
The
so basically, there are four labor codes. So I'm not going to. I presume the concern here is more with the code on social security. Uh, the code on social security, even when it was formulated, and I remember I wrote a note on behalf of the central trade unions for the Ministry of Labor on that code. There is no financial chapter to the code. There is no financial chapter. In other words, The government does not even envisage spending a paise on the social security code. And that seems to be borne out by the fact that the government has not is not allocated a single paise for social security in this budget, for additional social security. So it is only thinking in terms of contributory schemes, if at all.
Sorry. So there's another question asking about insurance-based health programs. Will it have adverse impact on the state government's capacity to invest in public healthcare programs like the NHM?
You see, the when I was in the NCUS, we had also advocated an insurance-based program, this thing which took the form of RSBY earlier. But we had said very clearly that this should be a transitional program. Transitional because we felt that at that juncture, 15 years ago or 10 this thing, there were not enough public hospitals to take care of hospitalization needs of the poor and so on. So we said, okay, if they go to the private sector, let them be reimbursed, and if they go to the public sector also, let the public sector charge the government, let a fund be created, and let that fund be invested in strengthening the public sector. In other words, what we had envisaged was that temporary insurance route would not come in the way of strengthening public provisioning of health, because there is no alternative to public provisioning of health. If you follow the insurance route, what insurance companies do is to constantly hike up health costs. They keep on hiking. This is the experience of the United States of America. Everywhere where solutions are only insurance based, the health costs keep continually spiraling up. Insurance rates continuously spiraling up. And at some point of time, either the governments will cheat people or they will cheat people by not, by denying them payments under this or that insurance scheme. So there is no alternative to public health insurance, and I think the government sorry, to public strengthening public health, and I think we very clearly the government is under investing in public health. The health policy document itself said that they should invest about 3%, whereas our total investment center in state is just about 1.6%, 1.7%.
Thank you, Professor. I would also request Professor Babu Matthew to reflect on Professor Ravi Srivastava's presentation.
Well, friends, I don't think I have the competence to do that. I have enjoyed Ravi Srivastava's presentation. And yes, I don't think there is anything which we don't understand in that presentation. Of course, how to get into and how to understand the nitty-gritty of the presentation. I've been making notes, but here and there we miss out what Ravi has spoken naturally in an oral presentation like this. So I'd request, WPC, first of all, to make a good document out of what has been spoken. And that will not end there. WPC and all of us put together, I don't think we have reflected enough on the issues that has been pointed out. So we must have a program where internalization of these dimensions, at least at the level of the leadership of the WPC to begin with. I think it's only WPC which can possibly take such an initiative. And so we must capitalize on that aspect. Pausing for a moment, doesn't all this reflect a complete change in the nature of state power? Is it correct to say that now state power has shifted into the hands of monopoly capitalism? And so, in that context, when we speak of an alternate strategy, what does it really mean? Who's going to care for that strategy? Where is our ability to mobilize people in favor of such a strategy? At an analytical level, what I'm asking, is that correct? And if I may go a step further, because I've been also preoccupied with issues of strategy And in that context, I raised this question. I've come across two kinds of studies which analyze this dimension deeper. One is in the context of the rise of fascism in Germany, where economists have looked at ordoliberalism. And that is an attempt to say that, monopoly capital can go as far as resulting in fascism. The other is something more recent, progressive liberalism. So it looks like there are people in search of different alternatives to neoliberalism. And does that kind of a journey help us in any way? Or are there other approaches? First of all, conceptually, and then to see how to spread the message in a manner in which it will help people's movement. Sorry, I'm off the mark a little bit, but thank you for the space.
No. Definitely, it's useful, Professor Babu Matthew. This is something which we wanted to talk about, and thank you so much for that. But then, is there any immediate reflection on what Professor Matthew had said from anybody who is here from the WPC?
There are many people who are not from WPC, Sundar. They are also welcome.
Yeah, definitely. Because as both Professor Ravi Srivastava and Professor Bob Matthew mentioned, I mean, the whole idea of WPC, if I mean, just trying to recollect the foundation, is that no, we wanted to emphasize on that there is no one left behind. So that's the starting point, and then from there, building the whole thing from bottoms up approach. And so just looking at the miseries and the crisis at the bottom of the pyramid is what the whole WPC's perspective is all about. So in that context, now we seem to be even I mean, drifting away from even the popular campaigns called decent work, etc., which was led by the ILO. So things seem to be really in bad shape. And then with this labor codes coming up, there was again an anxiety and concern, and then things seem to be right now very clear in where the direction of state power. So it is in this context, definitely we need to have separate discussions on strategizing and responding to this situation. Definitely, we need more discussions within WPC, but to encourage or to lead us on those initiatives, is there anybody who can reflect further on this direction?
Hello, can I have a few words?
Please, sir, please.
I'm not from the WPC. I'm an outsider. I've been keenly listening to the talk, and I am very much appreciative of Professor Ravi Srivastava, the way in which he presented it. As a remark to his presentation, I would like to make a small presentation. One thing is that, you see, when we are speaking of the lowest level of the pyramid of the working people, of which you are concerned, and we should rightly be concerned, but to address the issue, we should see the other side of the pyramid of profit. How do we control that? How do we address that? I feel that when the India became independent and the Constituent Assembly was formed, the fair wage question was debated. A fair wage bill was introduced. A fair wage committee's report was there. If that issue is addressed, Professor Srivastava has been telling the corporate profit is going up 18% per annum, whereas workers of even the highly organized industries are not getting that, not even getting to the share they are contributing. So that is one issue. I am not speaking detail of it. Only I am showing that particular aspect of trying to grasp the other side of the pyramid. That is the pyramid of profit. How do we address that issue? Unless that is addressed, I think labor economists will be not focusing uh, their attention to resolve this whole conundrum. Second point I would like to say is also briefly, increasingly digitalization is taking place. The labor is getting digitalized also. And here there are new issues coming up of wholesale non-application of labor laws to the IT and IT-enabled sector. Increasing demand of working hours. Like today morning, I saw Elon Musk suggesting 120 hours per week. That means 20 hours a day. A man must be able to work, and 4 hours only. Whether he can sleep or I do not know. If without sleep, can anybody work? To that level, it is going up. Their demand is on Indian digital labor. All these things are happening. There is also work-life balance issues are coming up, and these are areas which must be addressed. A person like me, who has been associated with the trade union movement for the last 6 decades, I find surprisingly there is no enough concern for this digitalized labor, which is increasingly becoming the strategic workforce and also the most exploited workforce. And just as the other pyramid, I am really interested in seeing that the issues of the unorganized labor and all these labors are addressed too. So this remark I wanted to make. If there is any, or in a future discussion, it may be addressed properly, is my opinion, please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Comrade Nair is from C2, I think, no? In Bangalore?
Yes,
Yeah,
CITU Karnataka.
Karnataka. Okay, okay. Good to see
With
you here, sir.
exception, I'm not very happy with my own organization.
So, do we have more questions for clarification?
Yeah, just a bit to add, Sundar. I think the notes from this discussion we will have, of course, which we can share, and maybe some of the questions that came up, which were broader, and what Ravi said about addressing the macro issue. I mean, what is the kind of development we are looking at? What is the framework that these budgets are also formulated within, and which also gives us clarity on the demands, on the demands, meaning the all the various demands that unions have been putting to the government, which in fact WPC also will formally hand over at the end of the yatra at the end of February. And but all the unions have been making very similar demands. There's nothing very different. So we will share that. So maybe we will continue the series and have some, or just like we did for the on social protection, like particularly on the ESI, um, the series that we did. We can maybe try and do a series, maybe twice a month. So Labor Access and WPC can do it together. So everybody is welcome to send their suggestions with regard to the themes.
Yeah, if I can just come in for a minute or two, just to, on terms of the broad comments which Babu made and which Mr. Nair made, both of which were very interesting. So one is this question of the nature of the state and how that has changed, let's say, from the United Progressive Alliance government to the National Democratic Alliance government. Uh, where we clearly there what we are seeing is a very different kind of government, basically, which is more monolithic and more where the political party in power is more monolithic, where the state and more authoritarian form of government, but which still has to manufacture consent through narratives, through populist policies, and so on. For the time being, it still has to do that, but which gives very little space for negotiations, compared to earlier period when there was some space for negotiated solutions, negotiations. uh, they don't exist, or they virtually don't exist any longer. So that we have a situation where the Indian Labour Conference has not been able to meet now, since this new government took oath. It met only once, and then never since. So there is this question of how do you address the kind of inequities which Mr. Nair has talked about, or how do you insert any discussion on any other strategy of development, uh, where there is very little possibility of discussion and negotiation. And this is, I think, the big question which we are really facing. How do we do that? How do we insert these questions? Uh, because where is the space? So the space can only perhaps exist if we are able to also uh, you know have a broad-based again another broad-based consensus on the alternative strategy, where there is a coalition, a very broad coalition, which can actually project an alternative strategy or alternative vision, so that it becomes very difficult for an authoritarian government to manufacture consent. So we have to look at those areas where where consent is being manufactured, how it is being manufactured, what are the narratives being built up, what are the counter narratives, the counter arguments, what is the scope for a very broad coalition. These are very broad issues. These are very broad issues, but these are obviously issues which any movement will have to address. I mean, I'm speaking as an academic, but yes, I think coming as an academic also one has to see, there was no difference in the earlier government and this government. Both pursued neoliberalism as a major form of strategy, but the ability of this government to steer neoliberalism towards, or what Babu referred to as a more sort of monopoly oriented form, is higher because of its political, its political form. It's much higher. So I think the political the we have to, as a movement, we have to contend with these changes that have taken place. But on the other hand, there is no other alternative but for movements to actually, to for manufacture to movements are the only way we can actually create space, or but through broader coalitions and broader spaces where consent can be created between parties and movements. So that's really a difficult task. So, but I think we are only beginning to we know some, we have to understand what is the basis for the way they are able to manufacture consent, and build narratives. That is very important. Because if the rulers are one step ahead, then it will be very difficult for us to keep pace.
Very true, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Uh, is there anybody else who want to pitch in on this?
We have only 6 minutes to end, so we can
Okay,
end.
yeah. If there is no addition from our friends, then I think we can close this meeting with this inputs that we got today about looking at the larger architecture of this whole social protection and including the wage and other rights of the working people, especially at the bottom of the pyramid. So, with that kind of an lead point, we can close it, and we can follow this discussion with further meetings, further focused meetings, taking up some of these specific issues, and maybe as Mr. Nair mentioned, looking at the whole realignment of profit. How do we realign, and in the context of labor codes, how do we address it, is what seem to be a key concern now. Because if this trend continues, and if there is no change in terms of neoliberal push towards depriving the poor further, and weakening the working class further, I think we have no choice but to seek for a total revamp of the whole architecture. That's the thing which seem to be inevitable right now. So that's the kind of scenario with which WPC might take it up in the coming sessions of discussions internally, and also take it up with linked campaigns in this context. So thank you, Professor Ravi Srivastava, and thank you,
Thank you. Thank you.
Professor Babu Matthew also. And I hand over to Meena ji for formal closure of this meeting.
Thank you, Sundar, and I must say a big thank you. Ravi agreed as soon as the suggestion was made, and he spent all this time simplifying many of the fundamentals, the economics fundamentals for us, and that broke it down in a way that we could understand. And that has always been his forte. So thank you, Ravi, for that, and thank you so much, Babu, for staying with us till the end. And very happy to have Comrade Nair here also, and for his participation. We would request him to be there in the other in future. This could you please share? Maybe you, if your contact is there with Babu, we will put you on our mailing list to let you know about future discussions. All those who are new, Sevanti, I saw there, 79, and please do join the conversations in future. Please do share your emails either with me or with anyone else you may know in WPC. So look forward to sharing the notes with you. And if there are any people here who are totally new and would like to share their emails and phone numbers, please add it here in the chat. I'm not closing the room until for another 5 minutes so that people can add their contacts. So thank you very much, and until next time.
Thank you.
In the meanwhile, Meena, just to think of concrete follow-up, one should be, in order to help us understand more fully and completely the budget analysis we heard. And the other is his observations, Ravi's observations about manufacturing consent process which is going on. So how do we get deeper into those issues? Maybe we must request Ravi Srivastava himself to come back on that issue on a suitable date, because I think this WC endeavor is certainly something unique in the present context of trade union labor movement that we are addressing. So those two, Meena and friends in the WPC, you must please take forward.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for adding your numbers and emails. We're making a note of it. Shweta, do you think you can make a note, or shall I copy them? I think I will.
One moment. I think I can. Just hold on for a bit.
Yeah, I'm not closing it so that you can just take
Don't
it.
close it. Yeah. I'll just make it.
Because I'm on my phone. There's a lot of people around here, so.
Okay.
Ma'am, hello, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, can I got your number or your anything for further next time, because I am new here. Can you add?
Nitesh? Yes, Nitesh, are you here still?
My name is Shivam.
Yeah, I will just give you. Nitesh, are you here still? Wait. Okay. Info at I'm sharing the email, WPC's email,
If
info.
you have any WhatsApp group, can you add me in
Yes,
your group?
yes, yes, we will. I'll add you. Some in a group. Yes, working people. I'm sharing the email so that you can write to us. It's .org or .com. Sorry, I'm terrible at this. Working info at Working People's Coalition dot.
But ma'am,
No, I'm just Shweta, Sundar. Please help. Just a minute.
Just a moment.
No. I was saying it's info at Working People's Coalition dot.
Just a moment. .org.in.
.org.in. Yeah, everybody who can take it down. Just a moment. Info and thank you, Sundar, despite your throat.
Yeah, thank you.
Seems quite bad, your throat. Info at workingpeoplescoalition.org.in. There, I've shared it. I'm waiting for you to.
Yes, I have taken screenshot, so it's okay. You can close now.
Wait. I forgot to. I should have sent it to everyone. Didn't send it to everyone.
Oh, wait, let me chat. Put it up in the chat. I am at the word. Oh,
CO.
Yeah, I've shared it on the meeting group.
okay. Yeah,
Hello,
that's the one.
ma'am. Can I got your number, mobile number, or WhatsApp number, anything?
Not much point in taking mine because I hardly ever take my calls. There's,
Okay.
but Nitesh's number is the Delhi office number. But unfortunately, see, the problem is that WPC is in the middle of a yatra. So both south as well as east to north, the yatra is taking place. So many people are involved with that. That is why many, so some of us who are not really into coordination are here and many others are not here. But Shweta, maybe can somebody's whose number can be shared? Hello, Shweta. Shweta is also gone. I think she's finished. One second. Let me just. Who is this? You do one thing. You send me a message. I will give you my number 7406.
Okay, 7406.
What? Sorry, what is your name? You said.
My name is Shivam, ma'am.
And you are from?
I am from West Bengal.
Okay. So how did you? You are part of any organization that's associated with us?
I am a part of a social organization. We are a social movement are like that we will do. So through that
Okay.
I will join in this. This is very useful and very good program for us.
Okay. Now, just a
So I
minute.
want
I'll
to.
just send you a number. One second. Because my thing is that I will be a disappointment because I don't always take my phone. So I will send you the coordinator will be the person. Take his number 965
965
408
408.
0151.
Acha, acha.
Okay, so
Okay,
this
ma'am.
is Nitesh. and the office of Janpahal, and he will give you the names of the people in West Bengal also, so that you can be in touch with the West Bengal, the other people in West Bengal also. Okay.
Okay, but some one number you tell this, ma'am, 7406. It is whose number?
No, no, no. That is my own number. There's no point. I don't take my phone most of the time. I only go on WhatsApp, and there will be no point in getting
Okay,
in touch
ma'am.
with me.
If you give the number you, I will just give you
No,
WhatsApp
no, no.
or message.
I will. You contact this number. Nitesh will be in touch with me. I'm telling you, many people complain. That's why I don't give my number, because I don't take numbers most of the time. So just contact this person, and you've got the email also. I suggest you get in touch there, because the people
Oh,
who are really in the know of things should be answering your questions. No, so
okay,
I'm
ma'am.
not really the best person to get in touch with. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, ma'am. If you have any WhatsApp group, can you please add me in this group or?
Definitely, definitely, definitely. We will form a discussion group, and then we will add you also.
Okay,
Thank
okay,
you,
okay.
people. So, have all everything been recorded? Can I shut the window now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
For
Thank you.
my side too. For my side too, ma'am. If you are have any email ID or like that, I.
I've written the email ID there.
Okay, okay, okay. This is your email ID. Okay, ma'am.
This is
Thank
the
you.
email ID for WPC. Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
okay.
Thank you very much. Bye bye. Bye bye.